Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name's Brian, and on today's episode, I want to talk about how I live mortgage-free on this beach. Well, not this exact beach, but this shoreline, like down the road a little bit, because this is the public beach. Cue the intro. Welcome back to Lake Erie's North Shore, Canada's most southern mainland shoreline. Today I want to talk about what this abandoned cabin build is going to do for us as an asset to our real estate portfolio. But before we can do that, we got to talk about a few terms. Number one, BRRRR, buy, rent, renovate, refinance, repeat. That's a strategy, and you can Google it. I got the keys to my first investment property on my 30th birthday. So I've been doing this over a decade now. It wasn't until 2019 that I actually bought my first rental property. And after successfully implementing a BRRRR, I bought the property right next door. In the real estate world, house hacking refers to a strategy used to try and figure out how to get somebody else to pay for your property. It could be renting out a room in your space, it could be renting out the basement, it could be buying a duplex and living in half of it. While I didn't quite do exactly that, I did spend a large chunk of my 30s throwing every dime I had at my primary residence mortgage, thus creating a ton of equity in my own home. So while it wasn't somebody else paying for it, it was my hustle and my side hustles and my passive income that did. As a result, I was able to pick up that second property and begin the BRRRR strategy. Swing some hammers, do some paint, put a tenant in it, go to the bank and say, what's this thing worth? And you find out it's actually worth more than what you paid in a very short period of time. That new gap creates the down payment on the next project. What I have learned in this process is the more property you own, the easier it is to borrow money from a bank. When I was a teacher with a pay stub, doing quite well in the province of Ontario, Canada, I had more run around with a bank than I do today, where I'm currently unemployed with no pay stub. So by 2021, we had BRRRR'd 4 properties and we had them cash flowing on Airbnb. There wasn't a ton of equity in them. There wasn't any equity in them because we had leveraged them completely in order to do the next project. The idea was for tenants to always pay down those individual properties, not me. And while that sounds easy and fun, try doing laundry for 5 places all summer long for years. It takes its toll. So while there wasn't a ton of equity in those places, when it came time to sell a few years later, the tenants had knocked it down nicely, plus the cost of inflation, which is about 3%, had crept in. And when those gaps get bigger, in other words, the amount you owe on the property and the amount it's worth, that equity gives you room to play. So when we wanted to move on to bigger and better things and we got tired of the Airbnb game, we got into it ahead of the curve in this municipality. Airbnb is heavily licensed now, and it wasn't at the time when we were involved. There's all kinds of fees associated with it, and it's become a bit of a headache where we live. So we made the decision to cash out, and we did. We sold all the properties in 2021, or maybe 2022. I can't remember anymore. But that little bit of equity in each property, that adds up. See, we had 4 rentals, all with a little bit of equity over the course of 2 years, paid for by somebody else. Which meant we could use cash to buy the garage cabin we're currently in. We also sold our former primary residence. So I joke about not having a shower at home, but I also haven't had a mortgage at home in 3+ years. And we're also using cash to build the second cabin just down the road. Now let's talk about that cabin for a second. It's going to be a 1 big loft bedroom house. The average in Canada for a one-bedroom house is about $1,900 and change. And because this build is brand new and located near water, I'm going to say it's $2,000 for sake of argument and easy math for the video. $2,000 a month is $24,000 a year. Now that's a gross amount that doesn't consider things like property tax, damage, cutting grass, etc. But $24,000 is a passive income from a tenant. That's gnarly. And that assumes we want a long-term tenant. I live at the beach. Short-term rentals around here easily do $200 a night. So if I want to put in the time and energy to run an Airbnb, I could do $400 a weekend or $1,600 a month just on weekends, limiting the wear and tear on the actual building. And I can use it during the week if I want to. And I don't have to worry about squatters because I live in the province of Ontario where the tenants have more rights than the landlord. And I think the Landlord-Tenant Act comes into play after something like 28 days. And so we always did a 3-week maximum on Airbnb. So let's assume I'm taking this $24,000 and I'm just investing it. Let's assume I don't need this $24,000 to live. That's $24,000, $2,000 a month, 12 months a year. A decent investment will do an 8% return, which is $1,900 annually on the $24,000 rental income. So now I've got the house cash flowing $24,000 a month. If I take that $24,000 a month and I invest it, it's going to do another $2,000 annually, thus paying for its own property taxes and other minor expenses. But that adds up. Imagine that's 1 year. If you did this for 5 years, it compounds, making the gap that much bigger. So not only does the property cash flow, the amount of money it generates earns interest, and just simply from inflation, the value of the property increases as the cost of borrowing goes down. Now, in this case, we didn't borrow any money. And with inflation doing 3% and real estate doing better, the equity in this place is just going to continue to grow, as is the rental income because of the cost of inflation. The money earned from this build is going to pay for the build right beside it as long as we do it intelligently. That doesn't mean house poor. That doesn't mean we stretch ourselves thin and we live off credit. We don't do that. We're in our 40s now. We're not as risky as we once were. Especially since we gave up our teacher's pension. Both of them. 2 full pensions. Gone. But if I rent that property out for 5 years, that's $100,000 saved. Assuming I didn't need it for anything else, just off the rent alone. Now let's talk about 8%. That's $8,000 on $100,000 over 5 years. And the property has gone up in value. Properties here have almost doubled in values in the last 5 years. And I live at the beach. And because these garage tiny houses are deemed vacant land, the property taxes are next to nothing, even near water. If that's not house hacking. See, the idea is to keep the cost of doing business low, and that includes property tax, and having the cash flow much higher. So to essentially properly burr this cabin, which is what we're doing, we bought a tear down and we're putting all kinds of sweat equity into it. We're increasing its value substantially. We can put a tenant in it, or we can do the Airbnb game, or we can flip it. But I don't want to because it doesn't owe us anything. One of the reasons we got out of Airbnb is because each of those properties had a massive, massive mortgage. And it was during the pandemic and our teacher consulting was taking a hit. Essentially, it just became too much to carry. But not now. Not now that we've waited a few years and let the dust settle and been smart with our investments. There's nothing owing on this cabin, and there won't be when it's finished. So to borrow against it to build next door is simply a no-brainer because I can leave my primary residence alone. This way, if we ever decide to get out, the house at home is perfectly fine and not touched by any of the other investments, assets, or liabilities. Now, my last tip for this video, when you try and borrow money against your primary residence, a typical lender, your traditional bank, will usually give you up to 80% of the appraisal value. That's not the case for rental property or second dwellings. We have a phenomenal relationship with our bank. And so traditional bank will give you a 60% loan, up to 60% loan on the appraisal value of your second dwelling. Ours currently does 70. One-bedroom houses around here at the lake, the comparables are about $400,000 or $500,000. And we'll probably be close to 3 when we're done. But if I can get this thing appraised for $400,000 and then I can get my bank guy to then loan me 70% of that, that's $280,000. So I may have spent $300,000 building this cabin, but the bank just loaned me $280,000 against it to go build the next one. And you know who's gonna pay for that bill? Airbnb, not me. And if you follow this formula forever, well, banks will throw money at you. Be very careful with tenant law, especially in the state of California and the province of Ontario, Canada. But if I spent $300,000 on this cabin and I already own the land because the cabin sits on a double lot, I've knocked that initial cost right off the top. So if a bank wants to give me $280,000 and I've got a expense-free lot right next door, that'll pay for that build. And then assuming we do nothing for 10 years but follow this growth linearly, well, both places are paid off and worth significantly more by the time I'm ready to actually be of retirement age. I always say that because I probably won't retire, but of retirement age. And that's just one income funnel. We do book publishing, we do keynotes, we do public speaking, we do books, we do YouTubes. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that like button. Check out some of my books if you want to learn more about my real estate investing journey, some of the apps I've built, and some of the smart decisions and poor decisions I've made with money. The last big project we did was a massive $500,000 house renovation, and we didn't make a dime. An entire year of our life dedicated toward this project, and we lost. So take it from somebody with experience, not here to clickbait you on YouTube. We spent $500,000 and a year of our lives and lost 2 years ago. But that's after the big win of 2021 when we flipped 4 properties. Over the course of your life, it's the line of best fit. 2 steps forward, 1 back. 2 steps forward, 1 back. But always move forward. So if you're ready to get started with house hacking, rent out a room in your place, rent out the basement, rent out the shed out back if you're allowed to do accessory dwelling units like we are here. That's gonna do it for this video. Windows and doors should be in. You're gonna have to stick around for the next video to see what the cabin looks like with the new siding. You're not gonna believe how different it looks. Peace and love from Canada's most southern mainland shoreline. Give somebody close to you a hug, tell them you matter. Don't forget, you matter. Catch you on the next one.